welcome back to the SKC Fighter Interview Show. I am not with the fighter, I'm with the promoter, Raul Diaz from Dynamite Kickboxing. Shout out to our sponsors, Project Pantheon, rocking the merch, Virtue Concrete, Dynamite Kickboxing, and Shipsco. Raul, how's it going?
Fantastic, sir. How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. Thanks for having me today. I just trained with the Dynamite Kickboxing guys. They're getting ready for fights. Malik has a fight today, Antonio has a fight tomorrow, and of course Kendra's fighting on SKC. So
Absolutely.
I got to roll with Colby also. It was a good training session. I learned a lot. So
I'm glad you did.
Yeah, thank you. Because my gym is, we do a lot of Muay Thai stuff. Like we do Muay Thai kickboxing too.
Absolutely.
But like this is like real kickboxing.
Absolutely. That's what we try to do. We pride ourselves on our kickboxing. And just try to really be the best at that one thing. We try not to veer off too much. Really try to focus and hone in on one thing.
Yeah, and it's evident, right? The working on one thing. Malik and Antonio. These guys are killers, man, for their age.
Thank you.
So a lot of respect from me. I want to get into. I know we talked a little bit before we started shooting too, but I want to talk about how you got into this. So talk to me about your journey into martial arts and what got you into martial arts and why you stayed with it.
Absolutely. So a little bit more about myself. I was actually in a dance group when I was a kid. So I'm from Chicago, Illinois originally, and I was in a Latin dance group when I was a kid. So I did that for 9 years, from when I was 9 years old all the way up to I was 18. And it was a youth dance group. So it was cool. Did that for a little while, and but I outgrew it. Because I was it was a youth dance group, and I was 18, and then there was just a bunch of other kids in the group. So it was kind of time for me to depart from that. And what wound up happening was, at the time I was working as a security guard in this one place, and one of my coworkers at the time was like, "Hey, you should try martial arts." Because with dance, I was practicing 4 times a week. I had a consistent schedule. I was, practicing every day from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. And so when that stopped, I didn't know what to do with all this spare time again. So martial arts kind of filled that void. I took my very first martial arts class when I was 18 years old. I started off with something called Shidokan Karate back in Chicago, Illinois. And just kind of took off from there. Shidokan Karate at the time, they had karate classes, but they also had boxing and Muay Thai classes. At the time, I was a huge MMA nerd, and I knew stats and like all these other things. I was like, the takedown percentage of so-and-so and all those things. But when I saw my very first Glory kickboxing show, it was back in 2013, because they had Glory 11 in Chicago.
It was live? Okay.
Glory 11 in Chicago, and I had heard of K1, I had heard of kickboxing, but I was such a MMA nerd that I was like, oh yeah, kickboxing, schmickboxing, whatever. It was just like, but Glory 11, they had the open workouts, the media workouts at the gym they used to train at. And so I remember I went to the gym one day and I was like, I can't train today because the gym is closed. What do you mean? Like, who are these guys? And then I remember walking through the hallway and boom, I bump into somebody like, oh, sorry, bro. And it was like Gokhan Saki. And I didn't know who Gokhan Saki was, right? Like, Gokhan Saki was there, Rico Verhoeven was there, Joseph Valtellini, Tyrone Spong, all these people, and I had no clue who they were.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I might as well check this out, because at the time, Glory was on Spike TV. And I saw my first Glory card, and I was like, this is amazing. Because even with MMA, I always gravitated more towards striking anyways. And then I just saw the Glory 12, Glory 13, and I was like, man, forget MMA. Kickboxing this is where it is. And I started coaching in 2014. I opened up Dynamite in 2014, and here we are 10 years later.
That's amazing. Amazing story. Man, Spike TV, I haven't heard about Spike TV in forever. I remember seeing Spike TV commercials when I was like 10.
Absolutely,
It's the men's network, right? That's where they had the Ultimate Fighter and everything. So, what a throwback. Oh, that's awesome. So talk to me about, like, from the time you first opened Dynamite Kickboxing to now. What are some challenges you've faced, and what are some lessons you've learned, and how you're applying those into your day-to-day business and also your coaching?
Absolutely. So when I first started Dynamite Kickboxing, that was in 2014, and what I used to do is I used to rent space out of gyms in Chicago, just because it was just a thought in my head. Is let me just try to start this thing and see what happens. So I started out by renting different spaces and kind of got burned along the way with different people due to miscommunications. And so one thing that I learned early is the importance of contracts and just kind of having things written down to make sure there's no misunderstandings or miscommunications. But started by renting other people's gyms for a little while until I built my membership up, and then I went and I subleased the space. It was an old Taekwondo school in Chicago. It was kind of going under. So the owner, he was kind of locked into his lease. He was like, I'm looking for somebody to sublease it for a little bit until the lease runs out. So I did that for a while. Then I had my own space, and again I had Dynamite Kickboxing open in Chicago for 6 years up until COVID happened. So from 2014 through 2020, Dynamite Kickboxing was open. And in 2020, COVID happened, and it wasn't deemed an essential business, so the city of Chicago closed my gym down. And you know, it was a rough time. I didn't really know what to do, so went on Google. I typed in what are the 50 best cities to live in America, and number 22 on the list was Greenville, South Carolina. And I had never even heard of Greenville before. It had like a little paragraph about different businesses like BMW and Michelin that were, you know, job opportunities. But there was a picture of Falls Park, which in downtown Greenville, there's a beautiful park and it has a big waterfall running through the middle of it.
Beautiful.
And I saw a picture of it and it just kind of caught my attention because I had never seen a waterfall in person before. And I was just like, there's a waterfall in downtown? What? That's crazy. So we came to visit in Memorial Day of 2020. So 4 years ago now. And we fell in love. My wife and I decided to move here, and we moved here because the cost of living, the weather, job opportunity for my wife, and then business opportunity for me because Governor McMaster did a press conference once where he said, I'll never shut down the state of South Carolina due to COVID ever again. And I was sold. So I came down here with nothing in 2020, no friends, no family, no gym, no nothing. And I started Dynamite Kickboxing all over again in 2021, and here we are in Greenville 3 years later.
Man, I mean, what a comeback story, you know. I mean, COVID was so devastating to so many people. Like for me, you know, I just work from home because I work in IT. And so like obviously, you know, I wasn't going into the office. That's when we like fully migrated to remote work, and you know, so I got to see the employee side of it, right? But you know, hearing stories like that, it's heartbreaking. You know, people's livelihoods are being destroyed by this. But I'm so happy that you're able to bounce back and able to open a gym here.
It was a blessing and a curse. You know, at the time, the first half of 2020, I thought the world was over. I was just like, I lost my gym. It got to the point where, you know, I couldn't afford to pay my bills, so I had to sell all my gym equipment. You know, I had bags. I had a different boxing ring before. I had, you know, all these different things. I had to sell them just to pay my bills and whatever. And it came down to the point where the only thing I had left from my gym were these mats here. These 3 mats. So, like, you know, I like everything was gone. And so I was just like, this is ridiculous. Like, why are other places in the country reopening but Chicago isn't? And so that's when, you know, we decided to just bite the bullet and move to a place that, again, where we didn't know anybody and just someplace in the middle of nowhere. But, I mean, it's been amazing for us. And Greenville is a really cool city. It's been growing a lot, developing a lot. I'm excited to see the future of Greenville, and I'm happy to be a part of it and to be able to provide this style of kickboxing to an area where it didn't really exist before.
Yeah. Talk to me about why the name Dynamite Kickboxing. What does this mean to you?
So, I'll tell you what it means to me. I'll tell you the origin story behind it. The origin story is kind of funny. The origin story just comes from playing video games, playing UFC Undisputed on the PlayStation. And, you know, there was, you know, you can create your own fighter. And so, you know, the game had different last names pre-installed, and my last name Diaz was on there, which was cool. But they didn't have my first name, Raul. But they have nicknames that you can choose from, right? And so I was scrolling through, and I like, you know, I went to the D section, and it was like Dynamite Diaz, and I was like, well, that sounds cool. So in the video game, they're always like Dynamite Diaz, and I was like, yeah, I like that. And then in that video game, you were able to choose a fighting style. So you could choose to be a boxer, kickboxer, Muay Thai, jiu-jitsu, judo, or wrestling.
It's like 2 styles you pick, right?
Exactly. So my style was kickboxing. So it said on the screen, it said Dynamite Kickboxer, and I was like, Dynamite Kickboxing, and like that's where the name of the gym come from. So I just came from a video game, you know, kind of funny, kind of cool. But what it means to me is just like, you know, what made me fall in love with kickboxing was just, again, the explosiveness of it, the dynamics, combinations, the speed, the power, the aggression, the style, the technique. That's what made me fall in love with this. So that's what I try to embody with our gym here as well. Like anybody that trains out of Dynamite Kickboxing is going to be an explosive, dynamic, high octane, high pace, high pressure, forward moving, combination throwing fighter. And like that's what we do, and that's, you know, what Dynamite Kickboxing embodies.
Who are some of your favorite fighters that have really inspired your style, but also the way you coach, your coaching style, the things that you just mentioned? So like, who are the fighters that you've watched, past and honestly even current, that feels like that embodies that style?
Absolutely. So again, the biggest fight that really opened my eyes and changed things for me was at Glory 13 Tokyo, when Joseph Valtellini competed against Nicky Holskin in the welterweight tournament final for Glory 13. And that, to this day, in my opinion, is still the greatest fight I've ever seen ever. And there's other phenomenal fights as well. There's so many great fights, amazing fighters, but to me, Joseph Valtellini versus Nicky Holskin at Glory 13 is what did it for me, because that was December of 2013, and then I started coaching kickboxing January of 2014. Like weeks later, I was like, I don't even want to do MMA anymore. Kickboxing, where I just want to focus on this now. So those are definitely 2 of my favorites. You know, Valtellini has since then retired, and Holskin is, you know, Still competing, but kind of slowing down a little bit in his career as well. But those are two of the early ones, But again, I was a big fan of Tyrone Spong as well. I wasn't really watching K1 when K1 was at its peak. But through the power of YouTube, I go back and can watch all these different people. And, some of my favorites from there, Andy Sauer, Masato, Petrosian, Buakal, Albert Kraus. A lot of those guys. Again, you have the Ernesto Hoos, the Andy Huggs, the, Peter Arch. So, I got a chance to go back and study the greats. But I didn't grow up with that. I didn't, come up watching it at the time when all those guys were at their peak. What I grew up watching, or not grew up, but, what was on at the time when I got into kickboxing was Glory. So a lot of my favorite kickboxers are a lot of Glory fighters. Again, Valtellini, Nicky Holskin, a guy named Robin van Roosmalen, multiple-time Glory champion. Alex Pereira when he was in kickboxing. Adesanya when he was in kickboxing. Artem Vakitov. I can go on forever. And again, it's interesting because, a lot of those guys have kind of, switched career paths. Like Pereira, for instance, is now in MMA. Adesanya is now in MMA. But some of the current guys that I really like and I really enjoy, there's one guy named Murat Grigorian who trains out of, Holland with Nick Hemmers. I'm a big fan of another guy named Tayfun Askan, Andy Semelier, another guy, his name is Elias Balade. There's just so many people. And I definitely draw inspiration from all of them, because I go and, there's an old quote that says, study the greats and become greater. So I try to study what they do and see how I can add my own kind of spice onto that. And another quote that I really enjoy says, success leaves clues. So it's just up to you to kind of find them, right? So, again, what are the best fighters in the world doing? Well, they're doing something. What is that thing? Success always leaves clues. So as far as some of my favorite fighters, those are some of those. As far as big coaching influences, aside from my original coaches back in Chicago, some people that really inspire me. Again, I was talking about in the class today. There's a gentleman named Lucian Carbon, who's kind of one of the architects of what we know the kickboxing to be today is. I'm a big fan of him. Nick Hemmers. There's another guy, not too many people know his name, but his name was Alex Palma. He had a big influence on our style as well. And several others. I'm just inspired by everybody. I don't know everything. I know what I know, but I don't know everything. I try to pull as much information as I can. As Bruce Lee once said, absorb what's useful, discard what isn't. So that's what I try to do here.
I'm going to try to put you on the hot spot here. So talk to me about, stylistically, kickboxing versus Muay Thai. So
Sure.
a big one was recently is Super Leg versus Taekwondo, right? So talk to me about where you think stylistically kickboxing has an advantage over Muay Thai fighters.
Absolutely. The one thing I tell my students here at Dynamite Kickboxing frequently when it comes to the eternal debate of kickboxing versus Muay Thai, a lot of it has to do with pace. So generally speaking, not always, but generally speaking, Thai fighters tend to fight at a slower pace. Kickboxers tend to fight at a faster pace. And so what winds up happening is whenever you have a kickboxer versus a Muay Thai fighter, no matter what the rule set is, it doesn't matter if they fight in kickboxing or if they fight in Muay Thai, usually the pace remains the same. And so the person who wins is the person who's able to dictate the pace on their opponent. So one of my favorite examples of this, again, going back to one of my favorite kickboxers, his name is Murat Grigorian. He fought a guy named Siddhichai 6 times now. Right? Siddhichai, famous Thai boxer, made the transition into kickboxing. So I've seen all 6 of those fights. The first time they fought, Siddhichai has a slower Thai pace. Murat Grigorian has a faster kickboxing pace. But Siddhichai succeeded at slowing Murat down. So he won the first one. Then they fought the second time, but if you notice this, Siddhichai fought a touch faster. Then the third time they fought, he fought a touch faster. And then the fourth time and the fifth time. So Siddhichai went and defeated Murat Grigorian 4 times because Murat wasn't able to dictate the pace in those 4 fights. The 5th time they fought, and again, granted, it's a lot of fights, but by the 5th time they fought, Siddhichai was straight up trying to brawl with Murat Grigorian, and he got dropped, and Murat won that fight. Then it happened in their most recent fight as well. Again, Siddhichai tried to speed up and match Murat's pace, and so he was unable to match it, and ultimately I think he got dropped. I can't recall if he got stopped or not, but I definitely know that, again, it was a matter of pace. So that's one thing that is one of the big differences with kickboxing and Muay Thai. Who can set the pace and who can follow? So one of my favorite examples, I'll tell people, Mr. Brandon, have you ever been driving and just had somebody on your bumper and you're like, bro, get off of me. They're just constantly on you. That's what it's like to fight a kickboxer, because kickboxers are fast-paced, in your face the whole time, and they're always go, 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 go. And, the slow driver is like the Thai fighter, right? So, have you ever been driving and you're stuck behind a car that's going 20 miles an hour and you're just like, bro, move. That's what it's like to fight the Thai fighter, right? Again, are there fast Thai fighters? Of course there are. Are there slow kickboxers? Of course there are, right? There are times that kickboxers have beat Thai fighters in Muay Thai. There's times where kickboxers have beat Thai fighters in kickboxing. There are times where Thai fighters have beat kickboxers in Muay Thai. There's times where Thai fighters have beat kickboxers in kickboxing. So everybody has all success. At the end of the day, it's just a matter of the fighters themselves, of course, at the end of the day, in the ring, and who is able to implement their game plan and impose their will the most. But that's definitely one of the biggest differences between kickboxing and Muay Thai is the pace.
Yeah.
Thai fighters tend to be a little bit more patient because it's a little bit more of a thinking man's game. They're hearing their stance, they're thinking, okay, cool, like I'm here, throw that kick, I'm going to check and then fire back, right? I always tell my students here as well, space equals time. The more space you have between you and your opponent, the more time you have to think. So in Muay Thai, there's a little bit more space in between, right? They'll go and they're not really charging in on each other. They're inching in and waiting for their opening. They're inching in and waiting for the opening. Versus kickboxing is more reaction based. There's no time to think because people are head to head. It's like two rams constantly, colliding in the middle. And so, with kickboxing, it's just all about your reactions. Muay Thai is more thinking. So as a result, if the kickboxer pushes the high pace and the Thai fighter tries to match it, they're not used to reacting and responding. They're trying to think about their counters, et cetera, et cetera. But if you're able to slow the pace down on a kickboxer, they're waiting for the reaction and it never comes. They're waiting for their chance to explode and it never comes, so they get stuck.
I put my friends on. I put my buddy Hyra on kickboxing because he's an MMA guy.
Yeah.
And I showed him a bunch of K1 fights, Masaki Noiri specifically,
absolutely.
and he's like, "Wow, this guy's fucking good." And so he started watching all K1 fights, all his fights. So I definitely put him on the K1 stuff.
And it's crazy because Noiri's an example of a slow kickboxer.
He was real patient, but he picks all his shots.
Exactly. Everything is calculated. Versus Takeru, who again, Japanese kickboxer, but all gas, high octane, go, 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 go. So again, with Superlek and Takeru, as you mentioned recently, Superlek took his leg out early and ultimately, again, kind of fractured his kneecap or fractured his knee or something to that effect. And so, Takeru wasn't able to get that hit the gas the way that he wanted to. And, again, Superlek, he picked them apart with the low kicks, so, yeah.
Talk to me about why you started SKC, and now we're on the 5th show. So talk to me about the differences from the first show to now.
Absolutely. So the reason why I started SKC was I'd always wanted to be a show promoter, just because I am so passionate about kickboxing, what I do. I'm trying to spread that as much as I can. And one way that I've been able to do that is through my gym. Another way that I've wanted to do that is by putting on shows and showing people what kickboxing is. To be a show promoter in the state of Illinois is expensive. You have to pay this fee. It's thousands of dollars. It's crazy. It was too expensive. Didn't make any sense. When I first moved to South Carolina, I was like, I wonder how much it costs here. It was $50. And I was like,
shout out to South Carolina.
Yeah, shout out to South Carolina, So it was like $50 to get started, and I was like, I'm in. So I did my first show ever having no idea what I was doing. I've never promoted shows before. I've helped other people in different capacities for different promotions. Back in Chicago, I've been a matchmaker before. I've been like a liaison, like between like the promoter and the state, because the promoter didn't really speak good English, and so just kind of being a mouthpiece to deal with the state of Illinois representatives and such. But I never kind of put it together. But it was just something that I was passionate about, and just follow my passion. I was like, well, I'm going to try to put these fights together and see what happens. So we did SKC 1 back in 2021, and it was a lot. It was a lot of hard work, and it was crazy. And again, a lot of growing pains that happened that day. I thought that I could be a coach and a promoter at the same time. And I realized I could not do that. So unfortunately, that was the first time in my entire coaching career that I had 2 students lose the same night and they both got stopped. And the reason why was because instead of being in the back with them and warming them up and wrapping their hands and getting them ready to go, promoter duties called me. They're like, oh, Raul, the live stream crashed. We need you to go do tech support and reissue passwords and reset the stream. And I was like, what? So I'm running over here. And then one of the fighters, somebody from the crowd, went in the locker room and stole their trophy.
What?
Their victory trophy. So they're like, hey, Raul, somebody stole my trophy. Can you help me find it? And I'm like, what? So I'm running around, I'm doing all these things. And then somebody came up to me and said, hey, Raul, such and such is next up. And I was like, what? And my old student was just standing there, didn't have his hands wrapped. He's just standing there like, what's up, coach? I'm like, let's wrap your hands and get you out there. And so, that was a big lesson that I learned that day. There's an old quote that says, you can't ride 2 horses with one butt. So, I took a break from trying to coach and promote at the same time. So that was a big lesson I learned that day. But ultimately, SKC 1 was one of my proudest moments as a promoter, one of my worst moments as a coach, but I've learned lessons from that to make sure I don't repeat those mistakes. But I did SKC 1, and it was a lot of hard work, and I was like, okay, cool, like, I did it, I think I'm done. At least I could say I did it. It's like a little feather in my cap. I put on a kickboxing show once in South Carolina. According to people from Greenville, again, I'm not from Greenville, but according to people from Greenville, that was the first kickboxing show that's ever been put on in Greenville ever. There's been MMA shows here that have had kickboxing in a cage, for instance, but like a straight up kickboxing show in a ring, the first ever from what people have told me. So like I feel honored to have been able to do that. I was also one of the first shows to take place in South Carolina after COVID. And that's what the State Athletic Commission had told me as well when we did that show. But I was proud of myself, and I was like, okay, I did it and I'm done. But then everybody's like, when's the next one? And I was like, what do you mean? They're like, when's the next one? And I was like, oh. And so I have a friend of mine, a local coach as well. His name is Hafiz. Shout out Coach Hafiz. He's like, bro, you've created the supply. Or no, you've created the demand. Now you got to supply it. So then we did SKC 2. And then we did 3, and then 4. And then, people were asking for Muay Thai. And I personally am not a fan of blended cards. So, one championship, I respect what they're doing where they have MMA and submission grappling and Muay Thai and kickboxing all on the same show. I think they're doing boxing now as well. And it's cool for people who want to be exposed to different sports. And they're doing their version of educating people as to what different, like one championship is putting Muay Thai on the map for sure and making Muay Thai more popular with the addition of 4-ounce gloves and fighting in a ring, However, I personally am not a fan of that. The way I look at it is, it's like if I was watching a basketball game and they do baseball 1 quarter, basketball the 2nd quarter, football in the 3rd quarter, and soccer in the 4th. Like, I don't want to watch different sports. I want to focus in on one thing. So I actually started 2 promotions. So I have SKC, which is our kickbox promotion, Southeast Muay Thai, which is our Muay Thai promotion, and coming soon, Southeast MMA.
Exciting. I've been fortunate enough to fight for both Southeast Muay Thai and Southeast Kickboxing. And I mean, I gotta tell you, like, it's awesome working with you. It's awesome working with you guys. And I really enjoyed it. And you always match up fighters really well. Like, everyone's at a good skill level. No one's fighting scrubs. Like, no one's a scrub on the card. Even when they're debuts, like, they're still put on a really good performance. So, yeah, absolutely. Like you said, you created the demand. Everybody wants to fight for you now because you put on a really great show.
Thank you. And that's been a blessing as well. In regards to matches, though, it's interesting because the way I book matches for shows is I book the matches that I want to see. It's not so much that, okay, cool, well, this makes sense. To me, I just look at it like, man, Eden versus Brandon would be a crazy fight. Or, Eden versus Logan would be a crazy fight. Or Malik versus what, like, so that's where my passion still comes into play. Like, I book fights as a fan. Like people have like fantasy football, fantasy, whatever. Like, to me, it's kind of like fantasy matchmaking. I get a chance to, work with all these talented people in the area and really shine a light because not too many people know about Southeast striking. Like, like when a lot of people in America think about striking, you think about like the East Coast and like the New Yorks or the West Coast, the Californias and whatever. But, I've been blessed to have traveled the country and seen a lot of different fighters from different places, different schools, styles. And the Southeast is so talented, but it just, there wasn't a big outlet for people to showcase their skills. And so I've been able to do that now. And, when I first started SKC, Southeast Muay Thai as well, I used to have to reach out to people and say, hey, would you like to fight on our show? And they're like, I haven't heard of you. And, so there was a little bit of that in the beginning. And now those same gyms that kind of ignored me in the beginning are like, hey, I have 5 people for your show. Can you match them up? So, and now it's kind of a big role reversal, whereas before I was having to ask people if they would like to be on the show, versus now my inbox is exploding with requests from different people from all over, not only the Southeast, not from the country. I have people reach out to me from Canada, from Colombia, from Brazil, from Hawaii. All these different people want to compete on the show, so I'm very blessed and honored to be able to provide that platform for them.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, if you haven't fought for Raul before, for any of the Southeast promotions, I love it, right? I did for both Muay Thai at the new venue, and I did it for SKC 4 for kickboxing at the old venue, and both are great. I love the new place. I think it's awesome. I love that the crowd is right in your face. And I was actually watching SKC 2, the King of the Ring, with Charlie and Cam and all those guys. and seeing the difference in the crowd from then to what it was at SMT two, it was insane. Like the crowd is so much bigger. They're so much more engaged.
Absolutely.
Because I was watching that fight, and everyone's just dead quiet. No one's saying anything. They're like, let's go, Cam. Let's go, try. Like, hear that sometimes. But now, the crowd's packed.
Absolutely. One of the big things is, again, as I kind of mentioned earlier, helping to educate people as to what the sport is. And not only in the Southeast, but in America as a whole. Because, for whatever reason, kickboxing has just not taken off to the same effect that Muay Thai has and MMA has, and, et cetera, et cetera. Boxing, of course, has been around forever, since the beginning of time. So boxing is always going to be popular. MMA is huge. And Muay Thai, again, because of the strength of one championship, is starting to get really popular as well.
Yep.
Rod Tang is becoming a household name.
Yeah.
Super Bond is becoming a household name. People of that nature. But kickboxing, for whatever reason, just has not taken off the same way. And, there's a common misconception. Whenever people hear kickboxing, they think of cardio kickboxing.
Yeah.
They think of,
like rock box.
And cardio kickboxing, gyms like that. And, not that there's anything inherently wrong with that. If you use it as a form of fitness, that's great.
Absolutely.
But, when people think kickboxing fights, like, they're just, you kind of met with that little, face scrunch. And so, again, Greenville in particular, the upstate area, was really well known for MMA, and that's kind of based off the strength of Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, who's from locally, Simpsonville area. And, he definitely put South Carolina on the map with MMA and, a few other talented fighters as well. But, and even though, again, they did, they have a striking style with their form of karate, Kempo karate, I should say. And just kickboxing, from what I know, from my time being here, and from what people have told me who have lived in Greenville for a while before that, just nobody knows what kickboxing is, And so just educating people as to, this is what it is. This not only for the fans as spectators to say, oh, well, this is what kickboxing is, but also for the athletes in the area as well who are unfamiliar with, the difference between K1 rules and Glory rules and, Muay Thai rules, and can I do this, but I can't do that, and can I elbow in kickboxing, or can I, whatever. So just a lot of education. And so, we've been doing shows for 3 years now, and so you can see that now. People didn't know how to appreciate it when they first came around. It was kind of like a novelty. But now they see that it's a sport, and I'm trying to be very consistent with my shows, put on something quarterly. That way we start to establish a pattern, and people know there's going to be kickboxing every 3 months in Greenville, and this is this, and that's how you grow the sport ultimately.
Before we start wrapping it up, as a promoter for SKC 5, which fight are you most excited for?
That's impossible to ask.
Yeah.
There's so many. Unfortunately, some of the fights had to be changed up a little bit, so I was really looking forward to the King of the Ring tournament.
Yep.
So unfortunately, that tournament kind of fell apart. However, we still have a great title fight between two talented guys there,
Absolutely.
Cameron Burton versus Tremaine Davenport.
Absolutely.
We have 2 pro fights on the card, so we have Walter McCord against Gabriel Diaz. So that's going to be a fun one, because Walter McCord has a great Muay Thai base versus Gabriel Diaz, kind of like flashy karate style.
Karate, yeah.
I think he also has a history background in Sanda.
Sanda Wushu,
Yeah,
all
so,
Eastern kickboxing.
The spinning kicks and the jumping kicks will be on full display with Mr. Gabriel. In the co-main event, we have AJ Weathersby against Derek Smith. Derek Smith, again, is a talented young pro out of Kentucky, who's looking to topple the king, and AJ Weathersby, who's very experienced with all his karate fights, kickboxing fights.
Our first pro champion.
Absolutely. So first pro champ defending his title. We have Charlie Miller, who is the inaugural King of the Ring, and he has been the most defending champion that we've had in the promotion's young history thus far. He's making his final title defense before he goes pro.
Let's go, Charlie.
So shout out to Charlie Miller as well, against a tough opponent from New York and Chris Anders. And again, we have talent. I mean, there's just so many fights on the card from top to bottom. I mean, I could be here all day. We have all the best strikers in the Southeast, from South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia. We have people coming from Tennessee, from Georgia. It truly is a strong regional promotion. It's not just people in Greenville fighting from there. My goal and my aim with the Southeast Striking Series has been to attract all the best in the region and beyond as well. I tell my fighters there's 5 different levels that you need to compete in order to have success in this game, which is the local level, the regional level, the national level, international, and then world level. So my student, for instance, Mr. Malik, he's competed locally, and unfortunately there's not too many kids his size and weight in the area, but he had that fight in November and beat one of the best kids locally, which made him the best fighter locally. SKC is the regional platform, so now he has the opportunity to fight against kids from North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, Georgia, Tennessee. He was supposed to have a fight against a talented young man from California. Unfortunately, fell apart. But again, I try to make this the regional platform, and then from there, people can move on to national tournaments. If you win a national tournament, then you go to international tournaments, then you go to world tournaments. And so, like, once you get to the top of that mountain as an amateur, then you go pro, and it starts all over again.
Yep.
Local pros,
Yep.
regional pros, national pro, and then you become world champion one day. So my goal with SKC is to make it the regional powerhouse for all the states in the Southeast and beyond as well. And if you're the best in the Southeast, then you're ready to take on the national level competition and keep going from there. Final shout outs. I just want to thank all the SKC fans out there, SKC, SMT, the whole Southeast striking universe. Without you guys, the shows don't exist. Please make sure you get your tickets to SKC 5. It's going to be a phenomenal card. Shout out to all of our sponsors. Again, we have Shipsco, we have Project Pantheon, Dynamite Kickboxing is also sponsoring the show, Virtue Concrete, and thanks to our media liaison, Mr. Brandon. He's the man. Without him, these interviews don't happen. I appreciate your time, and thank you for everything you do as well, sir.